For 15 years, every chip inside every iPhone was made by one company, TSMC in Taiwan. That was the rule of the entire smartphone industry. Apple designs the chip, TSMC builds it. Nobody else gets the work. A few weeks ago, that rule broke. Apple has reached a preliminary agreement for Intel to manufacture chips for Apple devices. Intel, the company that was being written off for 2 years. The company that lost its CEO. The company that almost everyone in the industry had quietly decided was finished. That Intel is now back inside the most important supply chain in the consumer technology. And the implications go far beyond Apple. Chips Weekly, where I cover semiconductors, the technology behind them, and the geopolitics shaping the industry. A few weeks ago, I made a video called Intel's Last Chance. I argued 18A was Intel's final shot at staying relevant as a foundry. Now we have an update, and it changes the story considerably. Today I want to break down what the Apple-Intel deal really means, who pushed it forward, and what Apple actually gets, and why. This must be the most important moment for US semiconductor manufacturing in decades. Let's start with the facts. On May 8, the Wall Street Journal reported that more than a year of talks, Apple and Intel had reached a preliminary agreement for Intel to manufacture chips for Apple devices. Intel shares jumped 14% in a single day. Intel stock is now up more than 200% this year. Now important. Neither company has confirmed which Apple chips Intel will make. We do not know if it is iPhone processors, Mac chips, Apple Watch silicon, or something else entirely. We do not know the volume, we do not know the timeline, and we do not know which Intel process node Apple chose. Industry analysts believe that the most likely target is 18AP, the improved version of 18A, which could scale as soon as next year, or possibly Intel 14A, the node after 18A, which is currently outpacing 18A's progress at a comparable stage of development. To understand why this matters, you have to understand what Apple has been doing for 15 years. Since the Apple IV in 2010, Apple has gradually moved every major chip in its devices to one supplier, TSMC. Apple is TSMC's second largest customer, behind only Nvidia. Apple typically buys out the entire first wave of TSMC's most advanced node every 2 years. That single supply strategy worked perfectly until it didn't. Two things changed. First, AI demand exploded. Nvidia, AMD, and every hyperscaler are now fighting Apple for TSMC's advanced capacity. Apple is being outcompeted for wafers by companies willing to pay almost any price. Second, geopolitical risk. Every Apple chip being made in Taiwan is a strategic vulnerability the company can no longer ignore. Apple needs a second source urgently, and Intel is the only company on Earth that can supply leading-edge capacity at the scale Apple needs outside of Asia. Now let's talk about what Apple actually gets. Intel 18A is 2nm class process, the first one developed and manufactured in the United States. It uses two new technologies: ribbon-fed, Intel's version of the gate-all-around transistor, and power via, backside power delivery, routing the power lines beneath the transistor instead of above it, freeing up space and improving efficiency. Intel claims 18A delivers performance and efficiency competitive with or superior to TSMC's offerings. And the yields are real. Intel reported 7 to 8% monthly yield improvements on 18A in early 2026. Yields are now ahead of internal targets, on pace to hit year-end goals roughly 2 quarters earlier. 18A is in high-volume manufacturing at Intel Fab 52 in Chandler, Arizona, now connected to 4 other fabs by 30 miles of overhead track. here's a part of the story that most people are missing. In August 2025, the US government became Intel's largest individual shareholder, buying a 9.9% equity stake for $8.9 billion. That is unprecedented in the modern US industrial policy. Washington is not just funding Intel through the CHIPS Act, it is now a direct owner, and that ownership came with a clear expectation. Intel had to become a viable second source for the US chip manufacturing, or the investment would be a failure. Reports suggest the Apple deal was not entirely organic. The US government had a hand in making it happen. This is a new reality of US industrial policy. The government doesn't just regulate the chip industry, it owns part of it. It pushes deals, it picks winners. Apple is not Intel's Foundry's first customer. It is a headline. Microsoft announced in 2024 it would use Intel 18A for the chip design. Amazon Web Services signed a deal with Intel to build custom chips on 18A. Tesla is on the list. The US Department of Defense is on the list. Intel Foundry's external revenue is still small, $174 million in the most recent quarter. But the Foundry business is now expected to break even in 2027. Intel 14A, the node after 18A, is already in design engagement with external customers. Commitments expected to be signed in the second half of 2026. The Foundry thesis is converting from pipeline to reality. Now let's address the elephant in the room. What does it mean for TSMC? In the short term, nothing. Apple is not leaving TSMC. The most advanced iPhone chips for the next several generations will still be manufactured in Taiwan. What is happening is diversification. Apple wants a second source. The same way it spent the 2010s diversifying assembly from China into India and Vietnam. But the long-term implications are significant. If Intel 18A and 14A actually deliver at scale, and if Apple ramps Intel-made chips into real volume, the entire economic logic of TSMC's monopoly weakens. TSMC's pricing power comes from being the only choice. Once these are two choices, everything changes. So what does this all mean? Apple is hedging its bets. Intel is being saved by an industry that had written it off. The US government is actively shaping a chip supply chain in ways we have not seen since the Cold War. And TSMC's monopoly, which has felt absolute for the 15 years, now has a viable second source for the first time. None of this is guaranteed. 18A still has to deliver. 18AP still has to ramp. Apple still has to commit to real volume. And Intel still has to execute with a kind of consistency it has not shown in over a decade. But the first time in a long time, Intel is back in the conversation. Not as a fallen giant trying to survive, but as a foundry with real customers, real yields, and real strategic importance. The chip war is reshaping the entire industry. And this week, one of the most surprising chapters just got written. If you find this useful, subscribe. I cover the space every week. And as usual, stay curious, stay sharp, and stay chip aware.